she's passionate about telling stories of amazing women who are rocking the world and empowering women to live, love, and thrive. Here's your host, Katherine Gray.
Hi, welcome to Live, Love, Thrive Women's Empowerment Hour. And we have on an amazing guest today, Dr. Anca Barbu. And we are so excited to talk to her because not only is she the only Harvard-trained voice box surgeon here in Beverly Hills, but she also has an amazing story of her family moving from Romania to the United States. And it's an incredible story. And I can't wait to share it with you. So please welcome Dr. Barbu. Hi, Dr. Barbu. How are you?
I'm well today.
You know, it's interesting how you and I met because my friend Gray Morrell, who you had helped, had turned me on to you when I was having a voice problem about a year ago.
I know, I'm so excited.
I was so freaked out. I was told I had like a what do you call it, a vocal cord that was paralyzed or whatever. And I was so nervous about it. You know, I think everybody realizes, you know, how important their voice is, right?
Of course.
And especially, you know, not only if you're a podcast host, but, you know, if you're just in everyday life, it's so important to be able to talk. And I remember people saying, "What are you saying?" And I'm like, "Oh no, this is a nightmare." And I went to you and you gave me hope and you told me what to do and even what to eat. I was so amazed that what we eat impacts our throat and its healing, and it was just amazing. So anyway, I'm so glad that our paths have crossed, and that you're on my show today finally.
Well, wonderful.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
And I think you're totally right, Katherine. I think we don't think about how important our voice is till something happens to it.
Exactly.
And whether you're, like you said, a podcaster, you're a mother who has to speak to her children, a teacher who has to teach.
Anybody. And I know you work on a lot of famous musicians, Meghan Trainor and the band Journey and all of these. I know you can't mention all of them, but a lot of celebrities and musicians that, you know, their voice is very important. But like you're saying, it's important to everybody.
Exactly.
Everyone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And yes, indeed, there's a lot I can't say, so we won't talk too much about naming names, but anybody who has to use their voice. It's, you know, we come out of the womb crying and screaming and using your voice. And as we get older, and our vocal signature is a lot of our identity. So I think it's very important. And it's not until something happens, even a transient laryngitis. I had laryngitis last week. Patients were coming in and kind of saying, "Oh, the irony of it," you know?
Right.
But I talk all the time. I talk to patients. I talk to my kids. I talk to my husband. I mean, we're talking today. And so I was worried I might still have laryngitis on our show today. So here we are. It's important. And I'm glad our paths crossed this way.
And I want to say this too. You know, one of the most important things with a doctor, I think, is that you feel comfortable with them. And I was really nervous about this voice thing. Like, would my voice come back? Was it going to get worse? And you were just so comforting and connective and authentic and amazing. And that's why I wanted to have you on the show, because I know not only are you, like, you know, famous at Cedars, you know, for your prolific abilities, and I also even just having you on the show got to learn about your amazing background, which we're going to talk about your journey here to America. But I just wanted to say that, you know, not only are you just like this smart, amazing doctor woman, and, you know, we know there's not a lot of female doctors in this field, but also just a wonderful human being.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you. I do think that a lot of who I am, obviously, you know, from my parents and what I've seen and learned, but also just the journey. And I think being the only woman in this, you know, in my practice here and my practice in Boston, a lot of times there is that little bit of a nuance that just comes with having a female physician.
Yes.
And so I think the ability to relay information and the ability to kind of do it in a nurturing way that a lot of people have that option and ability. It's just something that I enjoy doing. I enjoy having the conversations with patients. I enjoy explaining what's going on, not just here's your diagnosis, you have paralysis, you know, come back and see me in 3 weeks or whatnot. It's let's explain, you know, what that is, why it happened, how it happened, and
how we can fix it.
Yeah, how we can fix it, what we can do about it. And so it's the whole process.
Yeah. So let's talk about your family. And this is one of the things I love about the show is that, you know, I think on a daily basis, when we go to a doctor, let's say, we don't know their backstory, you know? We don't know. We just know that they're an amazing doctor, and, you know, but your backstory was so incredible. And in this time that we're talking about immigration and, you know, should we be letting immigrants into our country? This is just like a perfect example. Here you are, one of the most prolific, you know, voice box surgeons in the country. You studied with the best, and your family migrated here from Romania. You literally escaped communism. I know you shared with me that your dad first went to Germany and then sent for you all a year or two later.
Yeah.
Wow, that's like... Really,
talk about a rough childhood.
Yeah, that's really an incredible story. And just a little side note for people to understand about living in a communist country. You had shared with me this story about your dad had sent you from Germany the Haribo gummy bears. And you were so excited. And you shared them with your little friends because you were a kid, yeah. And how you got in trouble, like that the communists sent the secret police to your house because you had this foreign product in your house that you weren't allowed to have. I mean, something as simple as that. I mean, I think people that live here in America take these things for granted, that they don't understand what it's like to live in a communist country and why people want to leave there. Your dad was an economist, spoke about economy, and couldn't do that in a communist country.
No, he has his PhD in economics, and he was a professor at the university. That's where he met my mom, and just realized that that was not a place where he could foster his passion and grow in that kind of an environment. And so at the time in the 80s, 70s, 80s, it was really hard. I mean, he, as a professor, had invitations to go speak at other universities, but it always had to be within the Eastern Bloc. So the first opportunity that he finally, you know, proved himself that he was going to go speak and come back, and then he went to give a lecture and didn't, and it was a plan.
It didn't come back.
It was a plan my parents had, but that then it left my mom and I, and here I am as a little kid, like, where's Dad? And then he sends me these gummy bears every time I see him at the grocery store. I remember because I saw this little packet of Haribo, and like you said, I was so excited to share them. And there's a whole nother, you know, level that even to this day as an adult, I don't probably really know the full extent of it. My mom has since passed away, and my dad to this day doesn't really talk much about it. And so it's when we're at the grocery store and my kids want this or want that, and it's such an easy access for them. I always think back on how it was when we didn't have that. You know, there was foreign goods were not allowed. I mean, if you were a visitor to the Eastern Bloc and you went to the Black Sea, you could, with foreign currency, purchase like Tic Tacs and gummy bears. But as a Romanian, you were not allowed to have foreign currency.
Wow,
and so
that is just mind-blowing. And for me, being born in America and growing up here and not knowing that, I really appreciate these stories being shared, you know, of what it's like, and that we have to really appreciate where we live, but then also realize why it's so important to bring in the talent and the people for humanity reasons into the United States. And so I know there's a lot of people that are so glad your family migrated here.
Well, thank you. No, we did. Yeah. We did as my dad sought political asylum and received it. And I know so many people have much harder stories and much more complex stories, and sometimes everybody's journey is their own. Yeah. But I think having had that foundation, that closeness with my family and their support really allowed me to go from, you know, coming to America with not speaking a word of English and learning it off of a German English, dictionary to, teaching at Harvard.
Right. So you did your and I love the story how you ended up in LA. So you land in Manhattan.
Yeah, that's right.
Your mother's not crazy about it.
No, we went from Germany subways in the 80s to Manhattan subways in the 80s. So anybody who's lived in Manhattan in the 80s
it wasn't too cool.
It wasn't too great. And so we were in Manhattan, and on one of those street kiosks, we picked up a map of the U.S. and my dad says, okay, where do you want to go? I'm an only child. So I ended up picking the largest black dot next to water, and that was Los Angeles. So that's how we ended up in Los Angeles in the early 80s.
That's an incredible story, isn't it?
In December with winter coats from New York, and all I could remember is palm trees and looking up in the taxi cab ride at the palm trees from the back window. And to this day, everybody who knows me personally knows I have this affinity for palm trees and that view. That was my first view of what America would kind of hold. It wasn't the lights of New York and all that. I do appreciate, but it was the sunny palm trees in December.
Yeah.
And
you felt like you were home.
well, I didn't know it was home at the time. It was a new place. It was so foreign to me.
Right.
And so who sees palm trees? But it felt good. And the sun on your face as a kid in December felt amazing. Yeah. And to this day, I have a huge painting at my house of the palm trees. And
I love that
reminds me of that moment.
Oh my God, I love that story. That's awesome. And then you ended up going to UCLA.
I did for undergrad.
And then went to was it the first women's college for medicine that allowed women to go into medicine?
That's right, in Philadelphia. It was the Women's Medical College of Pennsylvania.
Oh.
And it was the first ever medical school in the U.S. that women were allowed to go to.
Now, when did they allow women? Like, do you know what year?
In the 1800s.
In the 1800s. So in the 1800s was when they first allowed women to go. Wow, well, that's got a great history.
It is. Philadelphia as a medical community has an amazing history. It was the first hospital in the United States was in Philadelphia. Oh. Most people don't realize that. They think it's New York or Boston. It was actually in Philadelphia. And then some of the first medical schools, and of course the first women's medical school. And that's where I went. I wanted to experience, I'd grown up in California, and after UCLA, I told my parents the opposite. Now I want to go to the other side again. Yeah. So I went to the East Coast and spent time in med school there, and then did my residency training at Case Western, and then my fellowship in Boston at Mass General.
And so then you began to train with the top voice box surgeon in the world, right? At Harvard.
Yeah. Steve Seitel's amazing man.
So how fabulous was that opportunity?
It was at a point in my life where it was my mom had just passed away.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
And it's been years now, and I had really realized that what I enjoyed doing in the surgical subspecialty was working on vocal cords. And so I did my round of interviews, and I went to Boston and met with Steve Seitel's, and we connected a little bit over this history of medicine and the Women's Medical College, because one of the founding fathers of what we do, Chevalier Jackson, was actually at the Women's Medical College, and he created a lot of the instruments and the procedures that in America were used to explore the throat and the airways at my medical school. And he went to his file cabinet, and anybody who knows Steve Seitel's knows he's a great historian, not only a great surgeon, and he went to his file cabinet and pulled out this letter from Chevalier Jackson that he had gotten, at some auction or somewhere from an antique source, and we hit it off, and we matched in the fellowship, and so I stayed there to do a research year with him and a surgical fellowship training year, and then he asked me to stay on as faculty. I thought I might come back after that, but it's kind of hard when you get that opportunity to turn it down. So I was with him in practice there for 6 years.
Oh my gosh! Yeah. And so you helped train the students.
Yeah, well, we as faculty at Harvard, you can teach at the medical school. So I did that, and then we trained fellows. So we trained when I was there, about a dozen fellows between the time that I started with him and I finished. And now they're all over the country. They're great friends of mine. And if one of my patients is in Miami, I know who to send in Miami. If one is in New York, I know who to send in New York. And it creates a family, a really kind of a...
So I know everyone's going to want to know, how did you leave that awesome opportunity and end up in back in LA at Cedars?
Yes, it's hard to say no to Harvard after a while. It's what happened was actually my husband and I got married in 2013, and for those who don't know, and I'll explain it, he is a priest. He is a Catholic priest, so everybody gets confused. How can you be a Catholic priest and married? But he was, it's a subsection called the Byzantine Catholic Church. And they're allowed to get married. Once they've gotten married, then they can be ordained. So he finished his theology, and work. And so then we got married, and the bishop called one day and said, okay, there's a church or a parish in California, in Los Angeles, and we really kind of want you to go out there and, as a young priest with a family, really establish that.
It's kind of unbelievable that it was LA where you were from. Mm-hmm. Oh, and you mentioned to me he's from Romania.
That's right.
Oh my gosh.
I know. Neither one of us ever thought we'd marry another Romanian. We met in Ohio, and then now here we are in California. And so his parish is in Sherman Oaks, and he's a chaplain in the Providence healthcare system.
But wait, didn't you tell me you got married back in Romania?
We did a destination wedding.
Right,
we
right.
did. Yeah. We decided to share our home country with our closest friends. We had about 25 folks from America, physicians from all over, from New York to Ohio to our friends in San Diego, and they all flew out to Romania for this destination wedding, and we hit up Dracula's castle and
but a lot of people don't know now that the communism is
it
gone
fell
now.
in 89.
In 89,
yeah, once
right.
the Eastern Bloc and the Berlin Wall came down.
And you hadn't been back there until like in the 90s?
In the early 90s, it was the first time,
right.
So about 10 years after we left.
And how did it feel when you went back? And I also want to mention at your wedding, you said the president and first lady of Romania were at your wedding.
Yes, actually
wow.
They were. Carmen, Johannes, she's one of my good friends, and her husband used to be the mayor of the town that I grew up in. And so, yes, they were at our wedding, and then we've seen each other. He also did some teaching at the Kennedy School at Harvard. So when they were on that side, we'd meet up.
That's how you reconnected?
Yeah, we reconnected. And so now every time I go back, we get to have at least a lunch or a dinner together.
That is a cool story. So when you went back to Romania, how was it different now that the communism wasn't there? Is it capitalist? Is it
it's a work in progress.
Yeah, it's still a long way from the U.S. Yeah,
I think it's a work in progress, and obviously, I think a lot has changed, and sometimes the differences in classes shows up even more, unfortunately, because there's people who certainly are still following in some beliefs from the old communist regime, and that's not helping things. And so,
because I would imagine you say, okay, it's no longer communism. It just can't change overnight.
It won't.
Yeah.
And people's beliefs, people who they are fundamentally, it's hard to change people. I mean, it doesn't matter in what specialty, what field.
Yeah.
And if some of the core values were still some that were under that time, it's very hard to do that. So.
Right. And your daughters, how old are they?
My daughters are, you caught me on the 1 month when they're 1 year apart. They're 3 and 4. But come next month, they'll be 3 and 5. So
wow. And you've taken them back there?
I've taken our oldest. I had to unfortunately go to a close family member's funeral in November, which is when we were supposed to do this.
Right.
And she traveled. She and I went by ourselves, and she was it's a very wonderful traveler and partner to have. Yeah. I mean, we had a long flight from LA with layovers, but she wanted to push her own suitcase. She wanted to meet everybody. She wanted to
it sounds like the apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
She's
a little tough one.
She's 4 going on 14 already. So she is.
Right. Oh, that's awesome. And you were saying to me that, because it's such a male-dominated industry, as most things are, that it was a challenge, being like they have no idea, men, what it's like to be a mom and a full-time doctor.
Obviously, I don't want to make any assumptions. There are a lot of wonderful men, my husband included, who are very hands-on in their families.
Sure.
I think it's hard, though, sometimes when your kids identify parents by their roles, so mom and dad. And so, for example, I come home from work and they want mom to put them to sleep. So if I'm on call and I'm stuck at the hospital and we're doing something, then usually the kids have a little bit of a harder time. And then that derails into, at this young age, a few days of still, reeling from the side effects of, delayed sleep, or they want certain things only mom can do. And so that's the hard part, because you're 100% mom and you're 100% doctor and 100% wife. And we all wear different hats. I'm sure, obviously.
Do you feel like you've gotten the balance down?
It's a work in progress. It's a work in progress. I think maybe when I look back at 90 or 100, even then I'll say I'm still learning.
Yeah. So being in Beverly Hills, at quite a famous place, Cedars is one of the best in the country, I think.
It is.
What is it like working there? I know you have a lot of celebrity clientele, and how do you handle that situation? Do you ever get starstruck?
Well, first of all, I have to tell you, I have the best team. I'm so fortunate when I came. I do think that there was a greater being watching over me. When I came here, I have an amazing team at Cedars, not just my partners, who I have 9 other men surgeons I work with and 4 other PAs that are amazing women, but I've got
a great team.
It's a great team, and I've got my assistant and my medical assistant, and they are what we call our squad. So we have they're so cute, they named it the Barbu squad, but I can't do what I do without them. So I think a lot of the times if somebody that may be well known in the community or in the world comes in, they do a really good job of kind of being filling me in and low key and helping. And I think one of the biggest compliments that I've gotten from patients is that we have an amazing team at Cedars, from the first person they see when they walk in and from they say hello to when they leave. I really don't think we could do it without them. And the guy who really started that practice at Cedars has built an amazing practice. Gene Liu is really just top notch, that he's put together a team that works so well together.
Oh, so you're fortunate. Yeah. What is the thing you're most proud of, in helping people? Like, what is some of the stories that you might be able to share? Not necessarily who, unless that you want to, but what are issues that people have with their throat that you surgically can fix or help with?
So like we talked about, anybody who has a voice problem. So if your voice has changed for more than 3 weeks, that's my one little plug to get it checked out. But what happens is that in my specialty, it's very rewarding, because when somebody undergoes, whether it's a surgical or non-surgical treatment plan, the first time they use their voice again, it's literally a tear-jerking moment. I mean, I specifically have a box of Kleenex on my desk because the floodgates open. When you hear your voice again, when it's the voice that you want to read to your children, or that you want to say I love you to your loved one.
It is very emotional.
It is a very emotional moment. And it's not just about a singer who can now go on tour again, who is actually, obviously a big deal, because not just for them, but everybody else that they're entertaining.
Right.
But it's, for cancer patients who have, I treat laryngeal cancer as well in the early stages, when we're able to still treat it surgically and spare chemo and radiation if possible.
Right.
And so
you can remove it and then they get their voice back.
Yeah.
So, and people lose their voice when they have like cancer?
Well, when there's a growth on the vocal cords, whether it's good or bad, it changes the vocal pitch. And and paralysis. I mean, you remember how your voice sounded when I first met you?
Yes.
And so when that returns, it is it's one of the favorite parts of my job. It does
bring you to tears. It does. It brings you to tears to lose your voice, and it brings you to tears to have it come back.
Yeah.
So
I've cried with my patients before.
Oh, I believe it. You're such an amazing person, and I love that you love what you're doing, and you're so good at it. I think when we do what we love, we are good at it. But
when you wake up in the morning and show up for what you enjoy, then it just shows.
Yeah. Well, keep making that wonderful difference in the world.
Thank you.
And thank you for being a guest today. Thank you. And we will see you all next week, same place, same time. Thanks so much for tuning in. Make it a great week. Hugs and happiness.